Welcome to Turn a Page, the official comic book club for Nerd Initiative. Each week, the NI Bullpen will be covering the world of comics, talking to creators, deep diving into some fantastic stories, and much more. Now let's hand it over to the team and turn a page.
And what is going on, everyone? It is Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and you are tuned in for another edition of Turn a Page, the official comic book club for Nerd Initiative. My name is Ken M. You know me as the host of the ODPH podcast. I'm also Nerd Initiative Editor-in-Chief. To my left, you're right at home. You know him as the head of NI Wrestling, but he also is a comic reviewer extraordinaire. Please give a warm welcome to the one and only Rich.
Guess who's back? Back again. Rich is back. Tell some friends. That's right. I'm back again, man. It's pretty soon I'm going to have to up my stipend rating, which I don't get one, by the way, to do more of these shows. But I'm pleasantly happy to be here because we got awesome stuff to talk about today.
Yes, we do. And because it's in his own his contract, he has to do his own intro.
Yeah, Magic Live and Direct straight from the ODPH studios. My name's Off the Cuff Tom, Nerd Initiative pop culture connoisseur, Rich, Ken, Aubrey, everybody else. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely, because tonight we have a very special guest on the line to talk about a book that is so many elements put together. It's political, it's social commentary, it's action, adventure, drama. It is literally a one-stop shop of everything you want from a comic, coming out May 7th. But the FOC is this week. So tomorrow, when you go to New Comic Book Day to your shops, you need to order multiple copies. If you're not making it there by tomorrow, you need to do it by Monday. Get this book in your collection because it is going to be something that is going to absolutely blow you away. And we are fortunate enough to have the writer of this on the line. You know his work from No One Left to Fight, the comic book story of professional wrestling, Savage Hearts. But that is in the past. We are talking the future, and the future is Free Planet. Please give a warm welcome to the one and only Aubrey Sitterson. Aubrey, what is going on?
How about that intro? Thank you, boys. That is too kind. And I am thrilled to be here chit-chat with y'all about Free Planet, especially because y'all got the important stuff out of the way. FOC on sale. Tell your local comic shop. Now we can just have fun. This is perfect. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're like almost professionals.
Almost. Yeah, we don't want to give that away. But Aubrey, like I was alluding to, and I'm serious as I can be about this book. This book is absolutely incredible. It's so many layers to it. How did this whole story come to be?
Free Planet began years ago, even prior to, so Savage Hearts came out. Savage Hearts is my prior co-creation, creator-owned book with Jed Doherty, who's my co-creator on Free Planet. And we did Savage Hearts that came out from Dark Horse back in 2021, but we'd probably been working on it since like 2019 or so. Things got delayed because of the pandemic. And Free Planet existed as an idea prior to that. And it was a thing I'd been kicking around based, the starting place really was Venezuela in space, right? Like this idea of a isolated, newly independent planet trying to carve out a place for itself by virtue of having a uniquely powerful energy source, which also made it a target. And that was really the start of Free Planet. There wasn't an artist attached to it. There wasn't a story or really characters beyond, I had ideas for archetypes. And they were archetypes that got pulled from two places, 60s and 70s prose sci-fi. So I'm talking Cordwainer Smith and Jack Vance and Robert Heinlein and Ursula Le Guin's a huge inspiration on Free Planet. And then also archetypes from history, from real world revolutions and civil wars. And, when I first started talking to Jed about what our next project was going to be, we'd done fantasy stuff with Savage Hearts. And I was like, how do you feel about sci-fi? And he said, really good. And I said, perfect, because here's this idea. And the starting point really was the characters, right? We had a general idea for the milieu that they would exist in. And then I sent him a list, right? The guerrilla fighter, right? The indigenous person, the conflicted medical professional, the religious figures from different aspects of the same, a split religion, different factions from it. And I sent him these archetypes, and he started working up characters, and it blossomed from there. That was the starting point.
Awesome. Now knowing how you guys kind of came about the story, it is now time for the elevator pitch. What is the story about without giving too much away?
I've been practicing this, boys. I can do this.
Yes.
Free Planet is about the first completely free planet in human history. They've just won their revolution, declaring their independence from a brutal corporate-dominated oligarchy tendrils stretching out throughout the galaxy. Planet is the only place that you can find that uniquely potent energy source. It's made them a target of multiple galactic superpowers. And the only people protecting the planet are the Freedom Guard. They're all revolutionary heroes. They all fought in the Revolutionary War. They're deeply committed to the dream of a free planet. But just like everybody in this great nation of ours, boys, they all have completely different ideas about what complete freedom actually entails. And that's what drives all the drama, the conflict of knowing you want to be free and you want to build a better world, but not knowing what that looks like, or how to square everybody's different demands for what this new society is going to consist of. That's what drives all of the geopolitical maneuvering, all of the big military action, and of course, because it's a geopolitical space opera, it's what drives all that intense interpersonal drama as well.
That's a lot to swallow, but trust me, it's not that hard. We've already read the book. So getting into that, you said you've worked with Jed before on Savage Hearts, and we touched upon, bringing him in with all these archetypes. How much did you really have to pull him into this project, or he was just like, I'm done, I'm in. Yep, you called me, I got you.
Jed and I had worked together previously. We'd worked together on Savage Hearts, and I met Jed through my uncle Howard Chaykin, when he was working as Howard's assistant. And so, Howard's been a big influence on me and my career and how I look at comics and how I think about the medium and the form. And Jed's the same way, from having spent so much time under Howard's, stern tutelage. And so, we're in Simpatico, right? We have a very specific view of comics and how comics should work and how they best work. So Jed and I were looking for the next thing to do together. If it wasn't Free Planet, we would have found something else. But Jed responded to it. Jed has done a lot of fantasy stuff over his career, but not so much sci-fi. And he was really eager for a chance to dig into drawing, making up big guns and vehicles and ships and stuff like that, and drawing weird aliens. And that's been a huge part of his contribution, is the extensive design work that he's done for this stuff. Not just the characters, but everything. The attire for different ethnicities, the way that, the different guns and weaponry and munitions used by different factions and confederations, planets, all of that stuff has been ideated by Jed, and it's funneled back into the story that we're telling. It's very much a research and design led project. And, amid all of the heavy design work that Jed's doing, I have done extensive research into real world revolutions and civil wars, primarily the 20th century, but also a little bit further back, in an effort to make this thing feel rich and intricate and lived in, right? To really contribute to the verisimilitude of the project.
Yeah, and you can definitely tell it. Just going over the story is just rich is the perfect word to describe it, because it is so multi-layered that when you're trying to really break it down, it's elements that, like allude to, is political, it's social, it's action, drama. It literally has everything rolled up into one, and it is something so easy to follow too. Like there's nothing that's super overbearing that I think overtakes anything, and that's something that, like, a true testament to what you and Jed and the team are doing there. Because it is a story, like you allude to, a space opera, but it doesn't get sidetracked by anything. It just is so character grounded amongst all these elements. Like, it's truly amazing to see.
Well, thanks, man. That means a lot to hear. And, I try not to use this word because it's a bad word in comics, but there's not really any getting around it. Free Planet's a dense book. It's dense. There's a lot there. It's dense in terms of the amount of words on the page, the amount of words in individual captions, as well as the visual information on the page, right? Jed doesn't skimp, right? Jed doesn't leave out backgrounds. He doesn't kind of like sketch things in. Everything is like, yeah, look at that.
Yeah, just
Everything
throwing
is
this up here.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, it's a dense book. It's a lot to take in. And, I'm very fortunate in that I, we thought, and we can talk more about this too, if you'd like, but, that density and that richness was part of the thesis statement for the book. It really wasn't, we wanted to make something richer and more complex and more challenging than our previous work, which we're proud of, but we wanted more, right? We want to push things more. And it would, that density, especially in terms of text and all those big captions and balloons you see all over the place, it works. It does work, and it doesn't feel overbearing. And the reason it doesn't feel overbearing is because of Jed. Is because Jed does, like, he doesn't just do balloon placements at the layout stage. Balloon placements are part of the layouts, and that's very much a Chaykin thing, right? And that's the influence of Howard Chaykin on Jed's work, is that when he sends layouts over to me, they are done in consideration of all these big chunky captions, such that the pages are overwhelming and there's a lot on them and there's a lot to take in. But the hope, at least, and it seems like it's bearing out with y'all with this small sample selection, at least, the hope is that it doesn't ever feel overwhelming. It doesn't feel maybe over. I do want it to feel overwhelming, right? When you turn the page, like, holy shit, look at all this stuff. But it doesn't feel impossible to get into. It doesn't feel like it doesn't feel burdensome.
The blocking is getting ahead of it really does help with the dynamic of how you want to read this book.
Well, thanks, man. I really appreciate that. And the captions are important. I think that we designed Free Planet to kind of work on 3 levels, right? Like there's 3 threads that are running concurrently, but have narrative and plot-based as well as thematic impact on one another, right? There's obviously, it's a military book, right? It's a big, heavy, intense action military book. It's also it's a space opera, right? There are like melodramatic soap opera elements with these characters trapped on a satellite together, bickering about everything, right? That's the second aspect of it. But the third aspect, and I think that if people pick up Free Planet, there's a lot of different things you can enjoy about it, right? You can just look at the art and you can read the word balloons and enjoy those 2 things that I just said, the military action, the interpersonal drama. You're going to get all of it. You're not going to be missing. You're not going to be confused, right, about what you're looking at. But then there's the other element. There's the geopolitical aspect of it, which includes not just the political, but the military, the philosophical, the religious, the economic, all of this world building, right, that's gone into the thing that exists in the captions, with the graphs and charts, with diagrams and maps and infographics that we've worked into the actual pages. And the thinking is that, and that's designed to work, is that is the through line, right? We have short anecdotal scenes, right, of different stuff, but what's pulling it all together is this through line of this future history discussing the larger world that all stuff takes place in. And and that was key for me, because if you look at my previous work, I don't use a lot of captions. The exception is the wrestling book I did, because it's nonfiction. But I recognize that a lot of readers, when they talk about smart books and cerebral and intelligent and rich and complex comics, there's something they all have in common, which is that there's a ton of words on the page. So the task for me was figuring out a way to do a book with lots of big captions that doesn't bore me, that I don't find to be, at odds with what's great about the comic book medium. And working with someone like Jed, it's possible to do that, right? And the intent and the thinking behind it is that those captions and that kind of geopolitical thread running throughout serves as a foundation that we can build all of that military action and interpersonal drama off of, right? Because that information, that larger contextual information, it does one of a few things, one or multiple of a few things. It provides the reader with additional understanding and context for how to look at the scene. It can provide the reader with a alternative point of view on how to view the scene, and sometimes it can even undercut what's going on in the scene by displaying the fact that the character's understanding of the world that they're within isn't perfectly aligned with the backwards looking historical view on it. So it's, it's all, the name of the game is complexity, boys. That's what it's all about. It's trying to layer in as much thematic complexity as we can within 20 pages each month.
I mean, if the first issue is any indication, you're hitting a home run with it easy.
Well, thank you, brother. I appreciate that.
Oh, absolutely. And especially like we were talking about the many themes surrounding this book, because like I said, political, social, and everything comes with. Which one as a writer did you find the most challenging or exciting to write?
Oh, it's tough, man, because building out the world has been a joy, but I think that what I've really fallen in love with is revolutionary history, which is interesting because the revolution in Free Planet takes place before the book even, like, the revolution's done. It's over when at page 1 of Free Planet they're celebrating the end of this successful revolution and their independence. But that's been what I've really fallen in love with, and is what has informed the entirety of Free Planet, this book about figuring out what freedom is, how we define it, and what we need to sacrifice to protect it, and the discipline required to protect it. These are themes that pop up in any real world history of revolutions and civil wars, right? I'm talking Russia. The books, I've got one right here. I'm going through this one the second time now. It's about the Spanish Civil War, and it's this thick. Yeah, they're all like this. I read Trotsky's History of the Russian Revolution. I read a book by this same guy about the history of Cuba and the multiple revolutions that roiled Cuba over time. The Haitian Revolution, the U.S. Revolution, of course, Chinese Revolution. I've covered as many as I can, and I'm still burning through stuff, because when you dig into kind of the complexity of a revolution and establishing a new state and a new society, it encompasses all of those things you mentioned, right? If reading about the history of Cuba or Haiti or Russia, you can't do that. You can't really get a full grasp of the complexities and the different factions at play and the disagreements and the failures to align on things that impacted the real world history. You can't wrap your brain around that without understanding all these different aspects, because they matter and they impact on the actual history. And that's the goal with Free Planet as well. So, such that, there are multiple religions that we got to make up in Free Planet, which I enjoyed quite a bit. I was raised in the church, so I had a lot of fun with that. But that's not there merely as an aesthetic choice or just kind of like an incidental thing. It impacts the narrative. It impacts the story, as well as the reader's view and perspective on the individual scenes being presented to them.
Yeah, and it is, like I say, it's the work getting put in. Like I say, it just resonates on the page with that too.
Very much so. So, Ken, can you throw up the picture of the roster right there with the team?
Yes, the Freedom Guard. Yes.
Yep. So, taking a look here at the Freedom Guard members, they come from various backgrounds, which I think helps, to weave this rich tapestry. What was it like developing such a diverse group? And you've already alluded to it, but how far back do their particular stories and lore go?
That's a great question. So, I have dossiers, that's what I call them, on each of the characters. I have
a good word.
Great word. I have a massive document with a dossier for each character that has, biographical information sketched out for sure, especially what they did during the Revolutionary War and why they are significant figures. Because these aren't just people who fought in the Revolutionary War. These are heroes. These are revolutionary icons on this in this new society on the planet Lutheria. And so I have that stuff sketched out and, detailed information about their role in the revolution. But I'll tell you what, the bulk of my dossiers are about the individual characters' beliefs vis-a-vis philosophy, politics, religion, economics. And, that's important to me. And I refer back to it constantly when I'm working on the book, because again, the goal is to have this richness, right? And the richness comes about from the complexity of the disagreements, right? And all these people who ostensibly agree to the same thing, but cannot get on the same page about stuff. And so, to further blow that out, for every single member of the core cast, I also have like sentiment descriptions for each other member of the cast, right? So there is discussion of what Keen and Fueja agree about, as well as what they disagree about, and what the pain points are. And that exists for the entire cast, so that we have this complex, and that was really the goal, right? Free Planet is different from a lot of comics, and definitely from the ones that I've worked on, in that we didn't come up with a narrative and then figure everything else out. The narrative is almost incidental. There's a story, to be sure, but the appeal and the interest of Free Planet is giving readers a chance to spend time in this complex, fully fleshed out world with complex, fully fleshed out, realistic characters. And then the drama just arises naturally after that, because you choose any event that could take place with like, I don't know, say a trade war, right? Like anything that might come up within the context of a new nation, or maybe a not so new nation. You bring that up and you throw that into the mix, and it's easy to determine how these characters would feel about it, given how much we fleshed them out ahead of time.
That perfectly segues into the next one. Where is the balance between your tech, mysticism, militaristic type characters? How did you, as a writer, give them each enough time to shine, and also to have this inner turmoil?
Well, it's tough, man, honestly, because y'all have read the first issue, so there are quite a few members of the Freedom Guard who don't really get a lot of page real estate in this first issue. And that is, one of the overarching goals of this first arc, right? Of this first 6 issues, which, check this out. The first 6 issues, completely done.
Nice.
All colored and lettered. Yeah. If y'all behave yourselves, maybe I'll give you a sneak peek of some of this in a little bit here. But that's it. It was difficult, man. And I kind of made Jed and I both made the call, especially with this first issue, that you're not going to meet everybody. It's just not viable.
Yes, sure.
With the level of complexity. So, that is kind of the fun thing, is each issue, especially early going like this, and it's ongoing, right? So we're hoping, my dream is Free Planet to be, the length of Free Planet to be measured not in issues, but in feet. I want a full bookshelf of this stuff, right? But in the early going, a big part of the driving narrative and how it's structured is introducing everybody to these people, and not just who they are now, but what they did during the revolution. Well, you get a little bit of that in the first issue with Gloria and Talon. You see kind of the roles that they played in the revolution.
Right on. So was there any ideas for this book that made the cut that you think that at the time you were like, oh man, that was a little bit over the top? And then the follow to that is there anything that you were like, oh man, I definitely can't do this, and it didn't make the cut?
That's a great question. So, Jed and I both have a tendency to veer wacky, right? If you've read our Savage Hearts book, you can see that if you read our the Archie one shot we did, you get it, right? We like veering into the more outre gonzo elements of comics. It's one of my favorite things about comics, because you have the freedom to do all of this stuff, right? You don't have to worry about things like physics or special effects budgets, or, you know, especially on a creator-owned book, the amount of people who have to weigh in on it are very, very small compared to other types of visual mediums. So, you know, that's something I really like to revel in. But I came to the determination that y'all are wrestling fans, so you'll appreciate this. Funny ain't money.
True.
Right. A lot of my work veered into humor and veered into the gonzo and the outre. And I think as a result, there has been this perception that my work is slight and ephemeral and not rich and complex. And Free Planet was designed to be a refutation of that. So, you know, we went back and forth a lot about some of the more gonzo elements. I'll show him to you. How about this? A little sneak peek. In issue 3, we meet our very first and the only truly alien member of the cast. That's Ambassador Ural Ken, and he's completely alien. There's no face, no eyes, no mouth. So the problem is he can't emote. The solution we landed on was make that sumbitch a mood ring. So, so whatever, you know, depending on what his emotional state is, his head color as well as his balloon color will match this key provided, this legend right here. But the emotions, they're not things like happy, sad, angry, like human emotions. They're complex, resigned, obedient, serene, detached, remorseful, reluctant, things like that. And, you know, there's a reason we waited until issue 3 for that. We wanted to kind of ease people in. And, you know, we went back and forth a little bit about like how much robot is Talon is the robot in issue 1, like how much robot is too much. And we did kind of, that was a point of discussion. But I'm glad we left as much Talon in there as we did, because almost everyone who reads the first issue, I like to ask folks who their favorite character is, because there's so many and Jed's designs are so strong, and almost everyone says the robot. Almost everyone says the robot. So I'm glad we left him in. The other part of your question, what's, you know, are there things that we left out? If people have read a significant amount of my work, you'll know that there is a tendency for humanoid space cats to show up, right? Like anthropomorphic cat people to show up. There are no anthropomorphic cat people in Free Planet. I know. It's a disappointment, but you know, again, it's part of this, you know, awareness of how audiences receive work. And, you know, if we go on like I expect, if we get a couple of feet of this thing, I'm sure we'll be able to work some space cat people into this thing.
So here we are. The funny doesn't make money stuff is work, but however, you have done a good job of like mixing in some wacky stuff as well. So that also works, because as you know, for every serious character there is your Danhausens or your Orange Cassidys. And with that being said, an idea that you can completely steal is if you do an anthropomorphic cat, I need it to be in the style of Orange Cassidy.
I'll take it under advisement. How about that?
Yeah, later on.
Yeah, the funny isn't money thing is really odd, man. Because, you know, you look around at books that people will praise as being very serious and smart, and there will be wacky, very, very strange stuff in it. I think a lot of it has to do with how it's positioned, right? I think a lot about when I worked at Marvel from 2005 to 2008 as an editor, and I remember and one of my favorite books that I worked on was She-Hulk. It was Dan Slott and mostly Juan Bobillo She-Hulk. It was one of my favorite books, and it never sold as well as anybody in the office at Marvel thought it should be selling, right? And this was before Dan Slott was Dan Slott, but it was hilarious work. It was really, really well done comics, and Juan Bobillo should be a superstar in my opinion. And, you know, the line on it was, oh, well, that's a humor book and that's a funny book. But then you would look at something like Astonishing X-Men, which was Joss Whedon and John Cassaday, and it was selling gangbusters, and that's also a very funny book. There are like very, very funny moments in it. But the difference is that I've kind of identified is that in Astonishing X-Men, the humor comes out of the visuals depicted by John Cassaday, as opposed to Joss Whedon writing jokes. Right. And that's contrasted with, Dan Slott's approach on She-Hulk, where things would very much be, pages would be structured around gags, and that he would write into the panel progressions and through the dialogue. And that's something we've tried to, and, so when Jed and I did Savage Hearts, much of that book is structured and paced like newspaper strips and Franco-Belgian comics, especially like Hergé, right? And so it's very much baked into it. And so it feels like a humor book. There is for sure funny stuff in Free Planet, especially as we get a little bit deeper into it, but it always comes from the art. It's funny because of the way that Jed's drawn the characters and their reactions to things. So it's a more natural type of humor arising from the story, as opposed to something that the story is built around.
It's not like just saying, hey, get it? It's there for you to find.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And I think that that's in keeping with kind of the larger macro approach on Free Planet too. It's, the idea is to create such overwhelming depth and richness of visual information that readers are incentivized to find things for themselves. The feeling that I wanted to capture was being a kid and getting a big old Dinotopia book from the library and just opening it up and poring over it, right? And this is I'm going to get deep into comics theory now, but when a lot of people think, I don't know if they think this, but they write and they draw comics in a way that would indicate this is what they think, that when you turn a comic book page, your eyes go to the top left or top right if you're reading manga. That doesn't happen. They've done oodles of cognition studies and eye tracking movements. What actually happens, whether you're reading comics or anything else, when you turn the page, your eyes bounce all over the place. Right? Your eyes take in the entirety of a spread, whether it's a spread or not, immediately upon turning the page. Then you go back and you read in whatever reading order is incentivized and encouraged by the book, and then you take it in again. And that this is a Chaikin thing too, right? The idea of the page, the fundamental storytelling unit of comics. And that's how we've approached Free Planet, right? It's not a narrative that we've broken down into issues and pages and panels that now you get to follow along with. It is a world that we've created that you as a reader, in absorbing this stuff and thinking on it and kind of pondering the thematic connections of the different elements on the page, you can create your own story. And can I show y'all something? I brought props. How about that? What a great guest I am. So this approach, and that's what I call it, the approach, because it's new for me. And it's something that Jed and I tested out when we were doing the Archie stuff. And I did it with Megan Hutchison, who I did a 3 or 4 issue Archie series with last year called Judgment Day. The most impactful, the biggest change for me, outside of the extensive amounts of research I'm doing, which is also new, right? And that's been transformative too. But even bigger than the research is I do thumbnails, but I don't do them previously I had done thumbnails after scripting, right? I would write a script and then I would do a little thumbnail to make sure that things work properly and can fit on the page. Okay. Now I do the opposite. I do thumbnails before I write a script, and I don't send them to Jed. He doesn't need them. It would be foolish of me to send them to Jed. But why this is important is that I'm never in a situation where I'm like, oh, okay, so in these 3 pages, I need to just move pieces around. Right. And I write a 4 or 5 panel page and hope Jed can make it interesting. That never happens. Every single, you can see, how I do it, right? Every single spread has, I don't move on until I have an idea for how that spread is going to be visually overwhelming, how it's going to use the medium in a distinct way, how it's going to achieve thematic richness and depth through visual design and page layout. And I do that before I script. And it's a way of making sure that I'm never slack off, that I'm never just doing the easy thing. And it's been transformative. It's if you think that Free Planet reads differently than my previous work, and what's more, everything else on the racks, which is how I feel. I think it's a completely different feeling book. That's why. That's 100% the reason why. And and I'll get out ahead of this question. Why didn't I do it earlier, and why don't other people do it? Well, it's a shit ton of work, boys. It's backbreaking labor. It's so difficult. Like it all is. I mean, that's the thing. That's the thing about the approach, inclusive of the research, the design work, and thinking about comics primarily as a collection of pages. It's difficult. It's easier just to do assembly line comics, just to come up with a 3-act structure and then break it across 6 issues and then figure out, what needs to go on each page. It's how I've done most of my work. It's how most comics are put together. Doing it in a different way nets us something different and something I think is better. I think it's the best thing that Jed and I have ever done by a wide margin, and this is why.
That's so interesting to hear. Like I'm just processing that, and just, I mean, to set it up, to flip how to doing scripts like that. I mean, you can definitely tell like the book has a different style to it when you read it, and now knowing that piece to it, I mean, it does make a lot of. I'm just mesmerized by that. But I think that's just such a cool technique, though.
It's been transformative. I mean, I keep saying that because it's the best way to describe it. It's allowed me to write a different type of comic, and it's caused me to think about comics differently, and it's open, and there's all these rules in comics, like how many captions you should have per page and how many words should be in each, and we break those throughout Free Planet. And the reason we're able to break them is because, again, those are rules to help someone very quickly and efficiently with a high quality floor, right? Churn out scripts, pass them to the, churn out scripts that any artist can draw, right? Mm-hmm. That again, will have a consistent level of quality. But by shifting how we're thinking about the page and how we're thinking about comics and actually thinking about the page, it empowers us to do different stuff and to have these pages loaded up with text and captions, but they don't feel overwritten because it's part of the design. And they've been ideated with that text as part of it.
So interesting. Like I said, I mean, I'm blown away by that. That's just, but to do something different like that in the comics too, especially run with it like with Free Planet, I think that's something like you touched on. It makes it stand out from everything else on the shelves. Because I know after reading it, I was like trying to find like a good comparison book to it, and I'm like, there really isn't one. And I think that's just a testament to the work done.
Well, thanks, man. What I tell people is it's for folks who love the the interpersonal space opera of Saga, but also the kind of complex future history of East of West, right? Yeah. And I think that starts to kind of hint at who the audience might be. But no, man, I do think it's a different type of approach, and it's picking up on what I consider to be a lot of abandoned evolutionary threads in comics, in the late 70s and early 80s. Howard Chaykin, of course, huge influence on this book, but, his work and efforts to start looking at comics this way as a collection of pages and as a design problem, not just a story problem and then somebody draws it, but holistically as a design task and how we're going to present these things. That in concert with I'll tell you who else is and Howard hates this because I've told him but Philippe Drier is a really big, the French cartoonist. It's a really big influence on Free Planet and the approach to the page, because I was reading a lot of that stuff and I was struck by two things. One was he clearly wrote those stories around ideas that he had for splash pages or spreads, and you turn the book sideways and stuff like that. And the stories were clearly written around those, and the stories were dreadful because they were just kind of I'm taking shots at Drier, but it's like that Lone Sloan stuff. It's more or less Elric fan fiction, and it's really just built around him having these big spreads. And this idea, these really cool ideas for these big expansive spreads that you can get lost in. And the story really isn't much to speak of, but it doesn't matter, to me at least, because those spreads are so incredible and they're filled with big chunky captions, the type of stuff that when I was an editor at Marvel, we would have said absolutely no way, a non-starter, you cannot do that, it's ugly, it doesn't fit on the page, blah 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 blah. But you know, I think even translated, there's a strength to Drie's prose that you know, there's a strength to his prose in and of itself, and crucially, the prose's relationship with the actual text is something different from what is de rigueur in contemporary U.S. comics. You know, to my perception of captions in U.S. comics, contemporary ones, they usually fall in one of two categories. They're either, you know, ersatz thought balloons, right, where it's what somebody's thinking, and that can be okay, but for me it has a distancing effect. It kind of bifurcates the narrative because you're all of a sudden you're looking at two different things, and then and the relationship between them I don't find terribly complex or interesting. It's just what the person is thinking. And then the other way that you can go, that people often go, is not even exposition, right? I think exposition gets a bad rap, as you probably tell from Free Planet, how much world building there stuff is in there. But it's not even exposition, it's just description, right? It's like the classic thing of like, oh, you know, the storm clouds were gathering and lightning ripped through the sky. It's like, motherfucker, I can see that in the panel. I don't need you to tell me that, right? And Drie's captions work differently. Drie's captions are, you know, it's what we tried to strike with Free Planet, in that the captions are self-sufficient. The captions are interesting in and of themselves. The art is interesting in and of itself. But where the magic happens is the interplay between the two, the thematic interplay between them. And that's what excites me most.
Definitely. Well, let me throw it back to something you said in there. You've been asking everybody about who their favorite characters is. I'm a big Keen fan thus far, but Basil is one that I'm keeping my eye on. Who has been your favorite character to write and why thus far?
He's not even in so he doesn't appear, you don't see him in the first issue except in the back matter, in the painted illustrations. So every issue has brand new essays, that has a brand new essay that either that further blows out something in the issue you just read, and or sets things up for the issue, for issues to come, for subsequent issues. And my favorite character is Jackson Crater. Depending on your look at this. Perfect. Here he is. He makes his debut in issue 2. And depending on where you sit, and it's a controversial thing on the Freedom Guard as well, he is either a tragically failed revolutionary and freedom fighter from a nearby planet, or he is a vicious, bloodthirsty terrorist. And opinions differ on it. And he is a complex figure, to say the least. He is violent and uncompromising, but more often than not, he's also right. And he's a blast to write, because he shows up in issue 2. The cast is very much conflicted about whether he's given asylum on Lutheria. As a political refugee, and he's given membership in the Freedom Guard for reasons that you'll read issue 2, you'll find out why. But he becomes a part of the team, and it's very controversial. And that, I mean, it's a perfect example of what we're talking about earlier, right? We have this world built out, we have these characters, it's informed by real world stuff. Okay, so what if we throw in a guy who is ethically complex, right? Who, depending, you know, and this is a very common thing, like reading the Spanish Civil War, there are countless figures on both sides of that conflict who are celebrated as heroes by their side, but are denigrated as vicious, monstrous war criminals by the other, right? It's a very common thing in every conflict. And so what happens, when we throw him into the mix, and the answer is chaos. Everybody, it's just more of this conflict. So he's been my favorite to write. Absolutely.
Awesome. I can't wait to pick up the issue and really see about this. So, Tom?
Yeah. So you're saying how, you were blocking things out and you're making sure that the narration and everything all flows and makes sense. Now, one thing, now this might be a little spoilery, and it's just something I noticed. Did you both come to the artistic idea? I noticed in a lot of those little narration bubbles that look like, files, that L's were bold. Like they were bigger than. Like I'm like, am I supposed to be like counting these, reading code? Like, is this a little Easter egg? Is there something, or is this just messing?
I
with
love
my
that
head?
you brought this up. I did a podcast with Casually Comics on YouTube with Sasha from Casually Comics, and she brought up the exact same thing. She's like, Aubrey, I've been, I don't want to question your art, and I feel like I'm missing something, and like, what do these bolded L's mean? And I panicked because I was like, what is she talking about? And I pulled out, I have we did ash cans for Comics Pro to hand out to retailers so they could see what this thing was like, and I tore through it and I could not find a single example of what she was talking about. It's weird PDF artifacts.
Okay.
It's just like a weird glitch. I apologize for the sleepless nights you've suffered trying to figure out what the deal is.
All 5 minutes of me going, what is this massive geopolitical space opera? And I'm just like counting L's.
What does
and going,
it mean?
What's it mean? What's it mean? It's a double rainbow.
It's really exciting. So it's exciting to me for a couple of reasons. One, it's just funny that it's just funny to me that you wasted your time doing that. But two, it's exciting to me because it shows that people are engaging with the material. And people are really digging into it. And, I think it's also a further example of why this thing needs to be read in print. I am so very impressed and grateful when anybody grinds through the PDF version of this thing, because it's very much from the ground up has been designed to be read in the print format. Can I show your audience something that they haven't seen before?
Sure.
Absolutely.
So this is one of my favorite spreads in the first issue, and I think it's really indicative of the approach. And and you can tell this is something that would read nightmarishly digitally, right? Like this would just be, and Tom's nodding because he remembers trying to slog through this thing, because it's exactly what we were talking about earlier. It's meant to be appreciated as a whole. It's not.
The good thing about the PDF, if you have a good version of Adobe Acrobat, they'll actually put the 2-panel spread right next to each other and not split it. So I can understand where you're coming from, but we lucked out with the way it came in.
Exactly. Yeah.
Except for the L's. I took the L on the
L. And so it's very much designed around being this kind of cognition theory that we were talking about earlier, in terms of like, you're meant to look at this thing in its entirety, and then you're meant to go through it, right? And it's meant to be consumed as one big self-sufficient piece, which is another benefit of the thumbnail approach that I used, right? Because the goal is not, all of these. Some people say that comics are a series of images put into a narrative sequence, and I disagree with that. I think that's storyboards, right? What makes comics special and what makes comics magical is the page, right? And doing the thumbnails like I do now, I'm able to say, okay, when you turn, this is pages 8 and 9. What are we accomplishing here? What is the big idea? What are we conveying here? And then I can ask myself, what are the most interesting visual ways to do that? And on pages 8 and 9 here, they're responding to an artisanal mining operation or extraction operation. There's a guy who's using his land the way he sees fit. It's his land. His grandfather bought that land. It passed down to him, and he uses it to pull this fuel source out of the ground and sell it to benefit his family. And the Freedom Guard shows up and says, well, no, you can't be doing that anymore. You have to start growing food. You cannot be doing that. And it's especially from a US perspective, that is oppressive. It's authoritarian, right? It's his land. Like what the hell? And so, it's quite possible that somebody reading this might get a little whiplash. Like, wait a minute. I thought this was a free planet, and we're 8 or 9 pages in, and they're already coming down on a guy about how he's using the land that belongs to him. But if you check out those graphs and charts, if you check those things out, you're treated to some details on the dire economic realities of this planet they're living on, which all of a sudden provides this additional context and a different point of view on the actual action that's taking place. And, that to me is a sterling example of kind of the larger Free Planet approach and how the complexity of the geopolitical world building is meant to inform and change reader perceptions of the action on the page. And it only this type of approach, this type of spread, if you're only viewing it a piece at a time, if you're only looking at that and then you're looking at this and then you're looking at that, it's not the same experience. You need to look at this whole thing all together and maybe bounce back and forth, look at the charts for a little bit and go back to the panels, then look at the charts again, the caption. Like, that's how this thing is designed to be appreciated, which I think is fundamentally different from most other comics.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. So I promised I would not hijack too much, but I'm going to tie this in because it works out perfectly. So firstly, to set it up, as you have done the comic, No One Left to Fight.
Yes, sir.
Which now, as a wrestling historian myself, I need to get myself a copy so I can read it. So I will be doing that. But because mixing in Free Planet, you have a robust amount of characters.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this little something in pro wrestling that's called, we have battle royals, but there's the big one, which is called the Royal Rumble.
Yes, sir.
If Free Planet was to break down into a Royal Rumble with all its characters, and even some probably we haven't met yet, who do you think would be walking away the winner of the Free Planet Royal Rumble?
Oh, it's Katya. I mean, she's the biggest, she's the strongest, but I think so Katya is the big muscle. So Jed draws great, Jed is the best at drawing muscle babes. So it would be foolish for us not to have a muscle babe in Free Planet. And she is our scientist, Katya. She's the one with the kind of the Bane face mask looking thing and the right to bear arms. I think that, with the big battle suit, like the big metal hulking suit that her husband Basil is in, I think he probably is ostensibly stronger than her, but Big Show rarely wins the Royal Rumble. He's just not agile enough, and people team up and they get rid of him. It's on paper it makes sense that the biggest person is going to win the Royal Rumble, but it doesn't really work out that way. I think it's Katya. It's Katya, absolutely.
I can see that.
I could definitely see that.
I can agree.
Yeah, either that or I could see Talon sneaking in there and doing some heel stuff to
maybe
make sure to win. I could definitely see that happening. But I mean, as we're going to be seeing with the series going on, we're going to have a lot of great characters that you're going to definitely fall in love with, and some you're going to really hate, just much like pro wrestling. But that is the beauty of this book, and we can't emphasize enough. Free Planet #1 FOC is April 14th, but do not wait until Monday to order copies, plural, of this book. You want to get multiple copies of this because it's going on sale for May 7th. Rich is jumping in.
I just want to say the pre-copy, you won't get the copy obviously in it, but the pre-copy might make the Easter basket list.
This is true. Rich is putting together an Easter basket
list. We're making a thing here at Turn a Page. It might make it.
Yeah.
I'll have to make a card for it though, because obviously you can't have the copy, but it's bought for you already.
Right, but it's cards. Like,
wait, are you on the Star Wars kind of thing?
No, I'm not on the Star Wars. No.
Okay.
No.
We're not just giving someone a piece of cardboard.
No.
Trust me, this book has got more going on to it than just cardboard. It is multi-layered drama, history, action, suspense, and everything that you want from a comic experience. When you hear about something that's going to change the game, it sometimes is used passé. This is a book that's going to stand out when it hits the shelves on May 7th, and you cannot afford to pass this up getting it in your pull list. Aubrey, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
We have to follow up and talk to you about Free Planet later down.
Have me back, man. Once you've read some more of these issues, I have a feeling you're going to hear me. You're going to be back to jabber at you some more. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry if I get going, man. You just put a coin in me and I go. So apologies if I'm steamrolling over all y'all.
No apologies needed. It was great.
Not at all.
No apologies needed. Like I say, we're all excited about this book, and we really are hoping everybody, if you're watching this on YouTube or hearing this in podcast form, you have the same excitement, because trust us, this is a book you don't want to pass up getting your hands on, reading a few times, because there's so much in it. You're going to want to do that reread, not because you have to, because you want to, because there is just so many elements involved in this book. It's truly an experience. So we can't specify it enough, stretch it enough, however you want to say it. I know I'm getting amped up about it because that's how I'm starting stuttering my words. That's how good this book is. So like I say, hit the comic shops, hit the pre-orders, and make sure this is in your pull boxes on May 7th. And we'll end it like we always do here on Turn a Page. When you're at the comic shop and you have a great issue in your hands, such as Free Planet #1, May 7th, because you pre-ordered it before April 14th, and you see somebody struggling to find something, hand yours off to them. Tell them to turn a page. We'll see you next time.
I'm out.